And that work ought to be shut down. As Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed. If God can't find poor people, what is Christianity? Game, gimmicks, words, massage, or life and death? I said it last night. You'd have to tie me down with ropes if we were so close to victory that something I had in my hand would give it. Carnal Christians, when it gets close to victory, will duck out. God brings it so close that those that couldn't give 1,000 could be the ones that bring it over. But just sit there glued to your chair.
Well, hello, folks. I'm going to do a little something again today because it interests me and I wanted to talk about it. So, I'm always interested in religious trends. I think people are generally slaves to fashion. In other words, we follow trends, and fashion trends could be, things you think and believe, policies you adhere to. It could be hip to be into Eastern religions for a while. And so lots and lots of people become Eastern religions curious. And then later, everybody's a new atheist, or, it doesn't have to necessarily relate to religion. It can be all kinds of cultural trends. So music changes all the time, and one generation after another just follow whatever the new music is, and they're perfectly happy to do that. And we see these trends all the time. Sorry, I got itchy eye syndrome. We see these trends all the time, and people tend to follow them. In politics, all kinds of cultural trends, and we just, get on the bandwagon. Something's attractive or interesting, and people start looking at it, then more and more people start looking at it, and then you have a kind of a tipping point where people get into something. And if you think that's not going to change in 10 years, I think you're young. You're a young person, or you don't pay attention to current events and culture and history and whatnot. And what goes around comes around. So you'll see things repeat themselves. History rhymes, As I said before, I think obviously technology has a big impact on how things spread and on, what we need at any given moment. And people in power will use technology to, support their power and their agendas and so on. And they have more access to technology and capital than your average plebs and proles. So, they're going to exert a great deal of force upon us everyday, ordinary folks, whether we like it or not. You don't care about politics or powerful people, but they care about you, kind of thing. So I opened up Jamie Wheel's newsletter, and he's doing a little exploration in several parts about religion in America. Of course, this isn't new. I remember watching a Herzog documentary about that decades ago.
you understand that God's work hangs on 600 miserable dollars? And you sit there glued to your chair. How long must I teach you the principles of spiritual warfare? 30,000 means nothing now. God is held to an open shame. While 22,400 pours in, $600 kills us. It has nothing to do with money at this point.
But anyway, I've seen these kinds of explorations over time. And so that's nothing new. But anyway, we have new trends to look at, and he's looking at them. Some of his friends have become Christian converts or cultural Christians. So he's interested in it again because, you know, his buddy Jordan Hall is a Christian now, you know, true believer, which is fine, whatever works. So he's talking about, what does he say here? He's embarked on an undercover tour of Christian faith and belonging in America. So I'll start my little movie recording here that I can, sync up so you'll see what I'm seeing as I go through things. So anyway, so he's doing this thing. So he put up a piece. He writes pithy sentences, one sentence paragraphs, easy to read, that are hip, full of cool terminology and so on, and lots of hashtags and things. So he's really cool. And he's got his fingers on the pulse of culture and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, he's an interesting guy. So there's that, right? And then let me see here. Where am I? He referred to one of the things that's good about Jamie and other people that I follow is that when they refer to something, they have a good reference point to share, which is interesting. So I've followed Scott Alexander for a long, long time. Astral Codex, and he's a rationalist. And in particular, I was very interested in his observations and critiques of Mencius Moldbug and Curtis Yarvin. Sorry, I don't know why I said Jarvin. So his blog is interesting. Again, some people will go overboard and say, well, he's a rationalist, like scientism or something. But yeah, he's rational. But I think he's fair about it, and he's not extremist like some of the tech bros in the ESCREAL acronym. So anyway, he talks about something that I thought was interesting. Well, he was referring to this, grooming, that scandal that happened in England a long time ago, not a long time, 10 years ago or so, where British of Pakistani origin, but born in Britain, had a grooming gang, and they were grooming young women and abusing them and so on. And of course, he's just making the point in his article that you can say you're not concerned about other people's welfare because they're not part of your group until something like this happens, and then suddenly you're interested. So you don't care what happens in Gaza, but suddenly this comes up again and you care about it. And then they were talking about invading England. I thought that was interesting, so I would read it. It was called the Rotterdam Gangs scandal. And just to show you real quick, So, sexual exploitation scandal, you can look it up on Wikipedia. All the people who claim a principled commitment to not caring about the suffering of poor kids in foreign countries suddenly care a lot about the suffering of poor kids in foreign countries. They flip-flop, right? Suddenly they stopped saying that every well-intentioned attempt to help another person will always backfire and end up causing incalculable harm. But once people care about a problem, they naturally understand that a vague possibility of poorly spelled out secondary consequences isn't an excuse to tolerate atrocities. So I'm always curious about these double standards in different cultural cliques and hypocrisies and contradictions. And you see it all the time. So people speak emphatically about what they believe in and their principles, but they don't apply them in a balanced fashion, right? They in a very biased way, they apply their principles. Suddenly, they've stopped saying that if you help poor people with no particular skills, you're a cuck who hates human greatness and wants to force the talented deserving to spend all of their time in forced emotional subservience to their inferiors. So this is like the Nouvelle Nietzsche type Ubermensch thing, you know, and he talks about based post-Christian vitalism. And that's something I wanted to talk about, put on the radar in case you're not familiar with it, because I think it's interesting. I don't know if you're familiar with the, slang term based, but it's like you've got swagger, you're not afraid of who you are, It originally, I think it had to do with freebasing cocaine, but then it got into just, being confident in yourself and not giving a fuck what other people think about it, So here's a definition of it. In this, he refers to based post-Christian vitalism. Post-Christian is like when the world got more and more secular, but we still come from culturally Christian, historically speaking, or we used to be Christian. There are all these churches in Amsterdam, and now they're just offices or, nightclubs or, art galleries and so on. So it's post-Christian, and vitalism is just the idea that anything alive has some special magical force, energy, spirit in it that makes it alive. So it doesn't depend on any scientific theories about evolution or chemistry or biological origins or, from a scientific point of view. So it fits in well with the creationist perspective. The homunculus in your brain type of thing, or the vital life force, the mystical, magical energy that separates us from rocks and whatever. So he says he's not attacking the people's position on grooming gangs. I think their position on grooming gangs is spot on, that grooming gangs are bad. I'm attacking their position on everything else. So he's approaching this from a philosophical point of view. The hypocrisy and contradictions in, based post-Christian vitalism, these groups of people that have to do with dominionism and Christian Zionism and prosperity gospel and all these kinds of things that Jamie Wheal is observing in his series. So based as an expression of admiration or respect, that athlete is so based, he never backs down from a challenge. Have you seen that comedian's latest special? It's so based. You respect him because he stands up for who he is. As an affirmation or agreement, I don't understand why people get so offended over everything these days. Based. It's like people need to stop taking everything so serious. based. The gesture that looked like a Nazi salute, a Sieg Heil, was not a Nazi salute. It was, Musk. It was just a joke because Elon Musk is based. As a descriptor of one's worldview, examples. I'm not about free speech and being true to yourself. I'm all about free speech and being true to yourself. I guess you could say I'm pretty based. I don't care about fitting in with the crowd. I'm just trying to live my life in a based way. I think everybody should be able to express themselves however they want. That's a based philosophy, in my opinion. See, I can't use based. Anyway, hey, based God, what's up? What's good, my based friend? A term of endearment. That's a new video game is so based. The graphics are insane, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, since I'm a boomer, I can't use based. I can use groovy or hip, but I can't use based. To use based would sound pretty stupid coming from me. But at least when a younger person or somebody who's in this culture, this subculture, uses the term, I know what they're talking about, So when Scott Alexander says based post-Christian vitalism, I know what it means, right? So this is this part here, based post-Christian vitalist. And you can look it all up. They have articles all over the place. And it's fun to LARP as the Nietzschean superhuman. But ask Raskolnikov how far that gets you. I think we've all have the same basic moral impulses, and that for most people, including most people who deny it, those potentially include caring about poor people you've never met suffering in far-off countries. So he's postulating that most human beings are just naturally, they have a compassionate and empathetic streak within them, and that's just kind of, normal to human beings, to Homo sapiens, and it's nothing to be ashamed of, It's there. So if you catch yourself being concerned about people starving to death in Sudan or something, it's okay. It's okay. We understand that you mostly only care about, having a Christian ethno-state in the United States and all that to bring God back to earth or whatever. But, it's okay to care sometimes. It seeps in, So there are all these weird contradictions. So I admit that we also don't have moral impulses for a lot of other things. It's hard to get as angry about kids suffering from some unpronounceable disease as about kids suffering because a scary-looking person rapes them. Even if the disease is horribly painful and disabling and terrifying and realistically worse than rape, and most people would pick the rape over the disease if they had a choice. So yeah, you might be presented with a hypothetical choice or a real choice. Would you rather have, this horrific disease where you suffer and waste away and lose all your faculties and all that? Or would you rather just be raped? You could compare this and say apples and oranges. I think the other one's worse than the other one, so I'll choose this one, Or maybe if you think that it's a mortal sin to get raped, and for some reason it's your fault if you get raped, and you're not even making a decision on it, then you would, rather die than be raped. And if it's God's plan for you to suffer horrific consequences of some terrible disease for 3 or 4 or 5 years, that's okay. That's God's plan. People will rationalize things however they want to. That's pretty normal. So my point is that not everyone starts life as perfect altruist and later has to ineffectively repress it. All you can do is try to hit your intuitions off against each other and try to figure out what best maintains your dignity as a human being and doesn't feel like you're trying to excise chunks of your soul In the end, I think your choices are something like: 1, give up on ever being more than a bundle of incoherent preferences. I think this is Donald Trump. I don't think he has principles. He just has, the preference of the moment, depending on who he's talking to and what he's seen on TV or listened to. Treat an issue as the world's worst atrocity one day and a nothing burger the next, depending on the level of media coverage, the exact wording of the story, and whose politics are getting flattered. So I think that's Donald Trump in a nutshell. So that's the kind of leader the United States is depending on, and everyone in his circle is going to try to manipulate him based on that gaping vulnerability. Number 2, keep coming up with more and more finely sliced rules that you hope will separate the things you care about and the things you don't into 2 different categories without requiring any changes to any of your beliefs or hard decisions. Well, I care about people in my country, but not in other countries. Oh, wait, the grooming scandal was in Britain, but I still care about it. Well, fine. I care about things done by bad people, but not by nature. Oh, wait. So you can see that form of reasoning just continues. It's a never-ending slice after slice after slice of, trying to come up with these rationalizations and justifications for what you feel at the moment. So 3, come up with arguments for why, miraculously, you have found yourself in the most convenient possible world, one where every attempt to help other people just makes their lives worse. And so you are forever excused from trying. So yeah, there's dogmatism and people who think they know the absolute truth of what's really important, full stop. And, if I get involved trying to help these people, it's just going to make things worse. So, I'm not going to go there. And you get into the blame the victim type of thing. Resolve the contradiction by ceasing to care about child sexual assault victims or anything else. He says this is not a real option, sorry. But you can see how that rationalization leads to some pretty absurd outcomes and thoughts. Admit kicking and screaming that you might be a good person. Do some moral philosophy to see if this implies anything. If you find that it implies things you don't want to do or don't have enough willpower to do, admit that you might be a sort of good person who is vaguely in favor of good things, but doesn't have infinite willpower, and realistically will not be carrying them out most days. And he says this is approximately everyone, right? Keep doing moral philosophy and testing it against your values and motivations until you reach reflective equilibrium. And that's not likely, but that's another thing you can look up. I appreciate people when they put these, even, this is a relatively old thing, so the Wikipedia entry might be pretty good. Anyway, you can look that up. I don't think you have to strain or lie or tie yourself into moral knots to justify being angry at child sexual exploitation in Rotherham. I think this is natural because there's a part of you, the best part, which cares about suffering and injustice wherever in the world it happens, even in foreign countries, even to poor people who you'll never meet. And I couldn't agree with him more. So this particular one from Scott is quite good. I'm right there with him, and I often say things like that in whatever I produce because intuitively it just makes sense. I'm not perfect. I feel compassion, empathy, anger, emotions when I react to things that I think are terrible and evil, wherever they happen, because I can recognize that people are people and that we all suffer the same way, and we all have feelings, whatever country you come from. And, you know, getting cancer in Iran is just as nasty as getting cancer in South Africa or Argentina, right? And children dying of childhood illnesses anywhere is sad, and I empathize with their parents and so on. Why is it so hard? I don't think it should be so hard. And then he refers to another article here, which I thought was really quite good, and unfortunately it's not lined up too well here. But I'll stop the recording and just read through it. So this one's called "The Army of God Comes Out of the Shadows," and it's from what is it, from the Atlantic, yeah. And it's kind of like, you know, the religion of Donald Trump, that he was sent by God. Anyway, these people I've talked about before, especially when talking about Christian Zionism, all the different factions and how it's a global thing and whatever. But it's a very interesting article.
As I said, it could be $1 million night, but at least I want to see it go over the $250,000.
Okay, so this new religious movement or fashion, obviously if you're part of this clique, you think it's God's will and all that, but it's a new apostolic reformation. So it's a new thing. There are new prophets. There are new spokespeople for God Almighty, and they're reinterpreting everything. And, you know, things have changed. It's not your Orthodox Christianity anymore, your pre-Vatican II Catholicism anymore, your average, you know, Calvinist Protestantism anymore. It's something new, you know, it's Christian supremacy, and it's associated with the far right and Pentecostalism and evangelicalism and Seven Mountain Mandate, which is a thing, advocating spiritual warfare. So there are demons all over the place, and you have to battle these demons, and you do it through politics and every means possible to achieve what you want, which is basically a Christian ethno-state, or eventually everyone on earth will become NAR. So it's Christian right. There's a whole bunch of people, Mike Johnson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Charlie Kirk. Anyway, that's a whole thing. So C. Peter Wagner, who I talked about when I was talking about Christian Zionism, he's like the guy who started it. So this article talks a lot about them and how, you know, influencer people like Tucker Carlson suddenly start talking about being mauled by demons and so on and so forth. So he never would have talked about that 10 years ago, but now it's cool to talk about it. He'll get more clicks and likes, and he'll get more viewers, and he'll you know, you're going to look at him more if he says these types of things now, because it's seeped into the zeitgeist and it's cool, and, you know, people are going to wonder what that is or why does he say that. And, you know, it's good for business. So they have their flags and all that kind of stuff. And so this woman, this journalist, goes to one of these churches and, you know, tries to learn about them, and they're trying to prey on it and decide whether or not she's demonic, because she comes from the liberal media, and that's one of the demon, satanic, you know, infested institutions in the United States, the Fourth Estate, you know, and so the enemy, and they have to prey on it and see how they should treat her, you know. Was she sent by God? Was she sent by demons? Should we be tolerant of her? Should we communicate with her? Should we kick her out? You know, it's confusing. It's hard really to understand from moment to moment what God's thinking and telling you. I don't know, it's so hard for a lot of people just to understand what the domain of science is and what the domain of philosophy is and what the domain of anthropology is. So apparently Jamie Wheel has an anthropology background, or whatever, engineering, physics. And then to understand what, religion and theology is, and the different aspects of these things. It's just so very hard for people to hold all those things in their head and say, I take from all those domains of understanding and learn about how the world works. It's so much easier to believe that there's this good and evil battle going on, and that you're on the good side, and that it's existential, it's live or die. And they really do use a lot of terminology that have to do with war, right? Spiritual war and so on. And
most of the media in the United States, the people are used to is, I kid them and say they worship the great God two sides. If they went down on the beach to report on the sun coming up, they'd add a line that there are some on the beach that say the sun didn't come up. And I've tried to figure out why I have no bland audience, it seems. Either people are for me or against me. And when I first came to town, everywhere I went, I was looked at like a freak, most of them against me. After a while, the tide has changed. But I take a stand on any issue that we're dealing with. I have the conviction, if you know your subject, you cannot avoid coming to a conclusion. So I think I polarize people. I take a stand, and whereas other people in media present two sides and leave you to make a choice, but the presenter's sort of neutral, I'm out there taking a stand, and I either end up with people saying, I've been waiting to hear that said, or wanting to go through the television screen and pound me on the nose. And there are some people that I think if Scott's for it, they're against it. That's a negative power if I wanted to misuse it.
And they're willing to give up their lives to make this world happen if they have to, because they're going to heaven anyway. So it becomes a kind of religious fanaticism akin to certain elements of fanatical Islam and other religious beliefs, even Hinduism and other things. There's this type of extremist fanaticism in many religions, and always has been for a long time, zealotry, and so it's just there. It probably always be there, and it's dangerous. And if you think that you disagree with that worldview and it's not good for people, they don't believe in democracy, right? They believe in God's law and so on. So you would have a king who would be divinely ordained and the ultimate authority, like the old style pope, the vicar of Christ and all that kind of stuff. Authoritarian, top down, Handmaid's Tale type stuff. And that's what they like. So some woman says, I personally feel like if you would like to stay with us, then I would ask if we could lay hands on you and pray, the woman said. We won't hurt you, another woman said. We just take everything to God, a woman sitting next to me said. Don't take it personally. The praying began, and I waited for their judgment. So she goes into it, and it's quite interesting. Talks about the founder, C. Peter Wagner. I would read it if I were you. It's interesting, and if you don't know about it and you're an American, you should know about it, because it's a thing that's driving a lot of politics today. And the forever Trumpers are really, really into this NAR thing. They are taking on these extreme beliefs that give them a sense of power. They believe that they have the power to change the nature of the earth. The adoption of these sorts of beliefs is happening incredibly fast. So I talk about in accelerationism a lot. So all of these extreme philosophies and ideas are accelerating, and we lack the patience to wisely consider these ideas and their ramifications, which is scary. And we don't notice it until it's right up on us, and then people are telling you that you have to join the NAR church or you're in big trouble. So J.D. Vance is really into this, and he describes political opponents as unhumans who want to undo civilization itself, and who currently run operations in media, government, education, economy, family, religion, and arts and entertainment. The Seven Mountains, the book that argues these unhumans must be crushed. So if you're not like me, don't hold my beliefs, and are not going to support me, then we're going to crush you. And of course, that's a revolutionary sentiment, and people on the other side might beg to differ, and you could have a really bad conflict going on before long between people who are more secular and democratic and so on, and people who are more absolutist and dogmatic religionists. Our study of history has brought us to this conclusion: democracy has never worked to protect innocence from the unhumans. The authors write, it is time to stop playing by the rules they won't play by. So this kind of stuff I've heard from reactionaries a lot. It's about power. It's about using the enemy's tactics against them, and to beat them, to defeat them, and to bring in some absolutist, utopian, religious state. And we see this, but of course, if it's Islamic people doing it, it's Satan, and it's evil and terrible, or anyone else for that matter. It has to be your thing. So it's your NAR thing against the world, and the judgment is you believe that everything is satanic, everything outside the church is satanic and run by demons. And when I was visiting the Unification Church, that was in their rhetoric as well. The outside world was satanic, full of demons. You had to drop all that and enter the Unification Church where it was safe, and you could, do right by God, bring God back into the world type thing. So it's very cultish. Not cultish, it's cult type stuff, which is, why it's kind of accurate to say that, the Trump fans are in a cult because a lot of them are these NAR people. Now, if you're a NAR person, then I'm satanic, and you have to pray against me or whatever. So they believe it's a beginning of a righteous movement, and it's the kingdom assignment. They have all these different battle cries. And this woman, she talks about this woman who bought a mountain for God, and lives on top of the mountain, and it's all that kind of stuff. So the violent take it by force, and then there's pictures of people, hands on Trump praying. So this is what you've got in the United States. These are the kind of people. So it's about God's total victory. Buckle up, Buttercup, Waldau said on his podcast shortly after the election, because you're going to be watching a whole new redefinition of what the Reformation looks like as Christians engage every sector of society. Christ is not quarantined any longer. We're going out into the world. So it's unleashing Jesus, Christ, and God. God and Jesus are so powerful and omnipotent and omnipresent and all that stuff that they're just not powerful enough to do it by themselves. They need your help. That's your duty. I never understood that. I'm thinking if God wanted the world to be a certain way, it'd be pretty easy to make it that way. But, you have all these rationalizations and theology around original sin and what it all means, and whether good works matter or just faith. It just goes on for millennia. It's never going to be solved. This is the new thing right now. There'll be something else in 10 or 20 years. By then, we're going to have a lot of hardship because of our inability to feed ourselves. And then you're going to have different fanatical movements. It doesn't look too good, actually, these kinds of trends. So this is a controversy. He was a guest speaker, and he offered what sounded, this guy, Joseph Garlington, went to talk at one of these churches. He was a guest speaker, and he offered what sounded like the first hint of dissent I heard in a long time. He talked about undocumented immigrants and asked people to consider whether it might be possible that God was sending them to the U.S. so they could build the kingdom. And, when secularization started really happening, kicking off, a lot of evangelicals went to Latin America because they were more receptive to the message. And so it grew like wildfire in Africa, in the global south. And so why not bring these Christian fanatics to the United States to build the kingdom and take it away from all these liberal blue state demons, demon-infested Satanists, So he just, said, maybe the guys who were supposed to pick the citrus fruit in California are here for a reason. Maybe God sent them. And he said, what if they are part of the harvest? He didn't send us to them. Maybe he's sending them to us. So you can see it's difficult to know from one minute to the next what God's thinking and to interpret it. And of course, according to these kind of people, everything you need to know about the world, about human sexuality, about human psychology, about biology, about anything, any domain, you can get it out of the good book, out of the Old and New Testament, the Bible, the King James Version, whatever version you're looking at. And that's it. So you're done and dusted. All you have to do is fray the pages of that Bible and go to church and, use your QR code to donate to the church and whatnot. He told them to separate from the wicked. If you've got a child and he says, come and let us go serve other gods, go tell them, I've got a kid who is saying we need to serve other gods. Can you help me kill them? Garlington said he wasn't being literal about the last part, but you need to rebuke them, he said. You need to say, honey, if you keep on that path, there is a place reserved in hell for you. So that's another thing that's nice with the New Testament, is you get to have hell. So you're constantly under threat by these people and by God Almighty that you're going to suffer and be tortured forever and ever. I don't ascribe to that. I don't think that's the way it works, but these people believe it. And they also believe that the Holy Spirit is telling them what to say. So they're not rationalizing, they're not parroting, they're not, saying whatever they want to say. It's coming straight, they're prophets, they're inspired, they're receiving the word of God. We're asking for a full overturning in the media, a man said. We're asking for all the media to turn away from being propagandists to being truth tellers. So if you wanted to discuss climate change or something uncomfortable, pandemic or whatever that was controversial, You're not a truth teller. You have to just talk about the Bible and interpret everything through that lens. And you're a truth teller. Everything else is demonic propaganda. So it's difficult to understand propaganda and dark psychology and the power of public relations and persuasion and so on when you don't know anything about it. You're just, my truth is my truth. It's very postmodern in a kind of way, but that's what you get. So their eyes need to be opened, a woman said. They don't know God at all. They think they know all these things because they're so educated and worldly, but they do not see God. And that's what we need, the harvest. So they have their own terminology and so on. So again, somebody like me that would ask you to read a book, I mean, I'm just an evil elitist son of a bitch who thinks he knows it all and thinks you're stupid, and what I should be doing is going to a NAR church. And people have told me that before, you're a white American dude, privileged and all that. You don't know what Trump people want. You're a hypocrite and all that. No, I'm not. I'm just, I think differently because of what I learned, that I was never given anything with a silver spoon. I had to work for everything. So the Reformation, the grandmother had it. The Reformation, a woman said. At one point, a man questioned, the whole world knows The Atlantic is a left-wing Marxist-type publication. Why would you choose to go work there? Another point, the group leader defended me. I feel the Lord has called her to be a truth seeker. So you're rationalizing, trying to figure out what the Lord wants all the time, At another point, the grandmother spoke of a prophecy she'd heard recently about punishment for the wicked. There are millstones being made in heaven, she said. Straight up, there's millstones. So you're going to have millstones around your neck or something. Another woman spoke of God's angry judgment for the disobedient. So it's a wonderful feeling, I think, if you believe this, and you're standing shoulder to shoulder with God, judging everybody, and knowing that you're right and everybody else is wrong. And what can you do? I mean, these sinners are possessed by demons. Maybe I can have some compassion for them because they're possessed by demons, but at the end of the day, they're not coming to God. They're not bringing in God. So, they deserve millstones. And there's a lot of people that are going to change their minds. You're going to become a NAR person pretty soon. You'll be happy with the changes God brings, a woman reassured me. You'll be happy. So if we all got on board and just surrendered to the church, everything would be fine. You'd see that the whole world would be cool. And so for secular neoliberal capitalists, all you need is the whole world to be managed by Western corporations, or your corporations, since they're all multinational, the biggest ones anyway. And you want to code the capital, come up with the law, make the rules. Everybody follows your rules. You make money. You funnel, using the wealth pump, you funnel it up to the top and somehow benevolently do a little bit here and a little bit there for the plebs and proles just to keep them off your back. And everything's copacetic. All Putin had to do was let the U.S. oligarchs run Russia, not the Russian oligarchs, and everything would have been fine. Same thing with Xi. Why are all these Chinese billionaires running Chinese companies and influencing China? It should be Americans. They're ungrateful because we sent them money and technology transfer, and they just turned their back on us. Nobody blames the corporations for it. It's somehow the Chinese did it to you. There's some guy who wanted to work in a factory building Tupperware so you could buy it cheap at Walmart. He's your enemy. She's your enemy. It just makes no sense to me. I don't get it. So anyway, she says, the author says, this went on for a while. I wasn't sure where it was going until the leader of the group decided that I should leave. She could not have been nicer about it. She spoke of God's absolute love and absolute truth and absolute justice, and then I headed to the door. A few women followed me to the lobby, apologized that it had come to this. They were sorry for me. As believers in the movement, we're sorry for all of the people who were lost and confused by this moment in America. The doubters, the atheists, the gay people, the Muslims, the Buddhists, the Democrats, the journalists, and all the godless who had not yet submitted to what they knew to be true. The kingdom was here, and the only question was whether you were in or out. So that's where we're at. The most powerful nation on earth is full of people like this, and they wield a lot of power because they want power. They want to control the United States. They want to win. They want their belief system to be the primary one, and they want everyone to submit. And what do? Like, alt normal people or alt mediocre people who just like sit and try to understand stuff. We do nothing. We watch YouTube and we watch TV and we read blog posts and we say, yeah, this is bad, that's bad, Trump's an idiot, whatever. And we do nothing. So I think it's easier if you believe in God Almighty. You have that emotional connection that, to get up and go to the mega church and, put some money in and vote for people like J.D. Vance and so on, because it's more inspiring than just self-righteous anger and disgust and revulsion at the evil and the stupidity and contradictions in the world. So that's our playbook. There's no revolutionaries, nouvelle, revolutionaries on our team. We just watch the Young Turks and feel, we're cool because we know better. David Pakman or whatever, or CNN or MSNBC or Fox News. That's the thing. So unfortunately, I think that's where we're at, and we're going to be in this place as things start to break down economically, materially, as the climate changes faster and faster, and we have a hard time adapting to it. And one catastrophe after another, one disaster after another, until it becomes kind of normalized. And we become more and more pacified every day, whether you're pacified by your religion or by, your political beliefs or whatever. You'll be content just to sit back and wait for something bad to happen, and then you'll get up and do something about it. All the stuff Trump says is nonsense. It's just bullshit, about valves of water that were turned off that we use to save fish rather than, send to Southern California to make beautiful lawns and whatever. These people are not concerned with truth or evidence-based information or science-informed or based medicine, anything like that. They're interested in whatever they believe, and what they believe is salient, it feels good, it's exciting for them, and it pits them against us, or us against them. They're on the good team and everybody else is on the bad team. It's just low-grade info, and tragically so, and most of us are paying attention to it, which is unfortunate. So I don't know what to do, but that's pretty interesting. I saw that Herzog documentary so long ago, and you think, well, we're going to get over this nonsense sooner or later. We're going to grow up. But we don't. We're Homo sapiens. So anyway, I hope God's blessing you and you have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the playoffs. I will watch football. Yes, I'm totally domesticated and pacified by entertainment, just like you. I love food and entertainment. So I watched Landman. I would highly recommend that. It's a very interesting series. And yeah, really good actors. Billy Bob Thornton is fantastic. He just gets better with age, that guy. He was always really talented, but his expressions are just there. I just get drawn into it. He's fantastic. Anyway, that was fun. So enjoy your bread and circuses while you can, and have a nice weekend. William T. out.